I'm addressing this video to those who may be watching the unabridged recitation videos that I've been making of the BDK translation of the Lotus Sutra. I think it's in the context of the acknowledgments in an ordinary book, perhaps a book of a scholarly nature, where the author indicates in so many words something to the effect that any errors or mistakes are his or her own full responsibility. And certainly that's the case within these recitation videos. That I take full responsibility, and there are two kinds of mistakes I want to mention. One type relatively minor, and the other, whether or not significant, is up to you to judge. The minor mistakes are that, in a given video, these are long videos, and there might be 2 or as many as 3 minor word omissions or word changes that have no effect whatsoever on the meaning of the particular sentence in which these words either should have been or would have been properly recited in a slightly different manner. If you go through word by word, you'll find these, and the easiest way to do that, of course, is by going to my friend Shaun's website, Dharmachakra Wheel of Dharma, which is featured on my homepage, where, as you probably know, Shaun, a young man in Hong Kong, is taking my videos and utilizing the recitation portion to create a video that then has English and Chinese subtitles. So again, if you go to his video, his corresponding video for a given chapter of the Lotus Sutra, you'll see, if you read it word for word, where these, what I would consider relatively minor mistakes are. It's pretty labor intensive to do these things, so again, I just haven't had the energy or desire to be that perfectionistic in that regard. Now, the other area, though, pertaining to the title of this video, which may evoke perhaps a little bit of humor, is that as far as all the myriad Sanskrit names, particularly names of bodhisattvas, names of Buddhas, also names of arhats and names of places, these Sanskrit names are very difficult for an English speaker such as myself to pronounce. Now, to credit Shaun, he has sent me material to give me guidance as to how to properly pronounce these various names, but chalk it up to my laziness, chalk it up to a judgment that it perhaps is not critical in the context of the purpose of these recitations, which is for spiritual sustenance rather than for academic preciseness. In any case, I want to recognize the fact that I have probably done a pretty bad job on pronouncing most of the Sanskrit names within the BDK translation. Now, other translations, of course, have translated some of these Sanskrit terms. And the thing of it is, some of those translated meanings, I think, have value because we have to look at what is the purpose of the Lotus Sutra. The purpose, in its most fundamental sense, perhaps, is as a guide to the bodhisattvas, a guide to the bodhisattva path, instruction for the bodhisattvas. And the titles of some of the bodhisattvas kind of indicate some of the ideal attributes of the bodhisattva. And of course, when it comes to the names of Buddhas, an even more fundamental purpose of the Lotus Sutra is to indicate that all beings ultimately will follow the one vehicle Buddha path and aspire for the highest perfect enlightenment and in effect become Buddhas. So again, some of the translations of the names of some of these Buddhas can give us an idea as to what are these Buddha attributes. Now, of course, there's lots of explicit language in the Lotus Sutra with regard to both the nature of bodhisattvahood and Buddhahood, but what I plan to do in the context of my failure to properly pronounce these very difficult to pronounce Sanskrit names is that I want to systematically go through the BDK translation and give you some of the actual English translations that, in particular, one other translation of the Lotus Sutra utilizes. And the one I want to focus on is the Scripture of the Lotus Blossom of the Fine Dharma, or the Lotus Sutra, translated from the Chinese of Kumarajiva, who is the same Chinese source that the translators of the BDK version used. And this particular version has a foreword by Stephen F. Tizer, who happens to be the D.T. Suzuki Professor in Buddhist Studies at Princeton University. His research focuses on the interaction between Buddhism and Chinese forms of religion, and he has also authored a book called Reinventing the Wheel, Paintings of Rebirth in Medieval Buddhist Temples. So this here is the cover of the Hurvitz translation volume, the latest one, and I'll give a reference to that down below. But the point is that in his foreword, what Tizer says about this translation is that, quote, Hurvitz's translation of the Lotus Sutra is being reissued in a second updated edition for several reasons. His knowledge of Chinese phonology, Sanskrit etymology, and the lexicon of Chinese Buddhism has few rivals. Compared to other English translations, Hurvitz's Lotus Sutra is distinguished by its word-for-word accuracy, its understanding of Chinese grammar, and its fluency. Unlike some translators, Hurvitz uses correct Sanskrit forms rather than an inaccurate system of alphabetizing Sanskrit, and he adopts standard Buddhological terminology for the translation of technical terms. So what I gather from this, and again, I'm no expert on the academic details of various translations, but I gather that this is a pretty accurate word-for-word translation of some of these Sanskrit terms. And I personally compared this version with 2 or 3 other versions, and I like it. I think that the translations he makes are again good in the context of being a meaningful teaching tool. The only thing I reacted to a little bit, and undoubtedly it's an accurate translation, is that for many of the bodhisattvas, it's prefaced by he who blah blah blah, he who, and of course he is reflective of the masculine gender, which of course was dominant at that time. If I were to exercise the prerogative to make any modifications there, I would indicate he or she who blah blah blah. Now, the only other thing I want to mention in this, so to speak, preface is that there are a couple of people who have recited some of these chapters from the Lotus Sutra who absolutely do seem to have correct Sanskrit translations, and I will give a link to their particular channels. And finally, let me just mention again and encourage you to go to Shaun's channel, which I will reference in the description of this video. He's doing fantastic work in utilizing my recitations to add on English and Chinese subtitles, and again, the Chinese subtitles are both in the classical and in the more modern type. He's extremely motivated to promulgate the Mahayana teachings, and I give him tremendous credit for his efforts to roll the great Dharma wheel. I think what I'm going to do is leave this video just as is with those references in the description, and then make the actual cross-referencing of the BDK Sanskrit names to English using the Hurvitz translation in a separate video.